In the stark, sun-bleached landscape of the Utah desert in the summer of 2010, a brilliant young black couple from Atlanta vanished into the redrock in silence. Elijah Sinclair, a PhD geology student, and his wife Nia, a gifted photographer, disappeared while researching the ghosts of the region's Cold War-era uranium mines. The official investigation, conducted by a dismissive local sheriff, was brief and cursory. It concluded with a convenient, age-old narrative. The two outsiders, unprepared for the brutal realities of the desert, had simply wandered off and perished. For 8 years, that was the story. A tale of tragic misadventure that left a grieving father with the cold, bitter conviction of a truth denied. Then, in 2018, a government crew, tasked with permanently sealing the desert's abandoned mines, blasted open the collapsed entrance to a forgotten shaft and made a horrifying discovery. Deep in the darkness sat two skeletons, perfectly preserved, seated upright on an ore crate, as if posing for a final macabre portrait. The find reopened a case that was never truly investigated and launched a modern forensic inquiry that would systematically dismantle the 8-year-old lie. The discovery of a staged crime scene, a sophisticated poison, and a damning entry in a dusty logbook would reveal that the Sinclairs were not victims of the desert, but of a cold-blooded murder, a crime of greed and racism committed and concealed by the very man sworn to protect the land they had come to study. Before I begin, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? It really means a lot to know you're here with us. We're in this together. Now, the email arrived in Samuel Sinclair's inbox at 9:15 p.m. on a Tuesday night in Atlanta. It was from his son, Elijah, a digital dispatch from the far side of the country, a world of immense, alien beauty that Samuel, a man of the city and the library, could only imagine. He leaned back in his worn leather armchair, the familiar scent of old books and lemon polish in his study, a comforting anchor as he opened the message. The subject line was simple: update from the Red Planet. The email was full of Elijah's characteristic intellectual fervor. He wrote of the Morrison Formation, of the geological legacy of the uranium boom, of the way the desert light played on the exposed strata of the rock. He described the haunting, skeletal remains of the old mines, the collapsed headframes and rusted ore carts that littered the landscape. It was the perfect, raw material for his geology dissertation and for the powerful, abstract photographs his wife, Nia, was taking for her MFA thesis. But it was a single, almost offhand paragraph, tucked in the middle of the geological poetry, that snagged Samuel's attention. The landscape is incredible, but the cultural geology is just as complex. We met a local deputy today, a real old-timer who seems to know every rock and crevice out here. He was a bit territorial about the old mines, warning us away from some of the unstable ones, but he pointed us toward some interesting formations over by the canyonlands. A character, for sure. Nia got a great picture of him, all squinty eyes and suspicion. Samuel, a retired professor of American history who had come of age in the crucible of the civil rights movement, felt a familiar, low-level prickle of unease. He knew the cultural geology of places like that. He knew that for two young, brilliant black academics from Atlanta, a territorial deputy in a remote, overwhelmingly white Utah county could be more than just a character. He typed a quick reply. Sounds fascinating. Trust your instincts out there. The most dangerous formations are not always made of rock. Call me on Friday. He hit send. The feeling of parental anxiety, a constant, low-grade hum beneath the surface of his pride. Friday came and went with no call. Samuel told himself it was nothing. They were deep in the backcountry, out of cell range. They were young, in love, and immersed in their work. They had simply lost track of time. Saturday passed in a state of growing anxiety. He called Elijah's cell. It went straight to voicemail. He called Nia's. The same. By Sunday morning, the anxiety had curdled into a cold, hard dread. He knew, with the gut-level certainty of a father and the historical certainty of a black man who had seen too much, that something was terribly wrong. The official call came on Sunday afternoon. It was a Utah State Police trooper, his voice a flat, professional monotone that felt impossibly distant. He informed Samuel that his son's rental car, a Ford Explorer, had been found abandoned at a remote trailhead in San Juan County. A search was underway. Samuel and his wife Eleanor were on the first flight to Salt Lake City the next morning. The drive south into the vast, empty expanse of the Utah desert was a descent into a waking nightmare. The landscape was stunningly beautiful, a panorama of red rock and endless blue sky. But to Samuel, it was a beautiful, silent monster that had swallowed his children. They were met at the county seat by Sheriff Brody Wilcox, a man who seemed to be a caricature of a rural lawman, with a large gut, a drooping mustache, and a pair of pale, dismissive eyes. He spoke to them with a kind of weary, patronizing sympathy that set Samuel's teeth on edge. "Folks," he'd said, his thumbs hooked in his belt, "you have to understand, this desert ain't Atlanta. It's a dangerous place. Your kids, they were from the city. They probably weren't prepared. No disrespect." The search, Samuel quickly realized, was a perfunctory, almost theatrical affair. A single deputy in a dusty pickup truck, a handful of local volunteers on horseback. The man in charge of the on-the-ground operation was the same deputy his son had written about, a man named Dale Lonergan. He was a tall, leathery man with a quiet, confident demeanor that seemed to command respect. He assured Samuel that he knew this land better than any man alive, and that if they were out there, he would find them. But his search was short-lived. After 2 days, Sheriff Wilcox called a press conference in front of the small brick courthouse. He announced, with a somber shake of his head, that the search was being suspended. Deputy Lonergan, he explained, had found faint tracks leading into an impassable canyon system known as the Devil's Maze. The tracks had vanished, and it was the expert opinion of his deputy that the young couple had wandered into the maze, become hopelessly lost, and had tragically perished. Samuel stood at the back of the small crowd of reporters, a cold, silent rage building inside him. It was a lie, a neat, tidy, racist lie. His son, the meticulous geologist, and his daughter-in-law, the sharp-eyed artist, had been dismissed as foolish city kids. Their disappearance had not been investigated. It had been categorized. They had not been searched for. They had been written off. As Sheriff Wilcox offered his condolences and the cameras turned away, Samuel knew that his son and Nia had not just been lost to the desert. They had been erased. Sheriff Brody Wilcox ran San Juan County not with an iron fist, but with a kind of lazy, gravitational certainty. He had been sheriff for 20 years, his authority as much a feature of the landscape as the Redrock mesas. His worldview was simple, forged by the sun and the silence of the desert. Locals were to be trusted, outsiders were to be suspected, and the desert itself was the ultimate arbiter of foolishness. The disappearance of the 2 black college students from Atlanta was, to him, a problem that had already solved itself. The desert had simply done what the desert does. His role in the investigation was primarily one of public relations. He answered the calls from the state police. He spoke to the handful of reporters who had bothered to make the long drive from Salt Lake, and he managed the grieving, agitated father who seemed to think this was some kind of big city murder mystery. The actual work, the dirty, dusty business of searching, he delegated, as he always did, to the man who was his eyes and ears in the vast, empty southern half of the county, Deputy Dale Lonergan. Lonergan was, in Wilcox's estimation, the perfect deputy. He was a man of the land, born and raised in a small, defunct mining town. He had a quiet, almost unnerving competence in the backcountry. He could track a coyote over bare rock and could navigate the labyrinthine canyon systems by the position of the sun. He was a man who spoke little but was respected, even feared, by the reclusive prospectors and off-the-grid survivalists who populated the county's remote corners. When Wilcox looked at Lonergan, he saw a living embodiment of the Old West, a man who understood the harsh, simple laws of the desert. He trusted Lonergan's judgment implicitly. The POV shifts to Wilcox's office, a cluttered room that smelled of stale coffee and gun oil. Lonergan stands before his desk, covered in a fine layer of red dust, his face impassive. He has just returned from his 2-day search. "Well?" Wilcox asks, leaning back in his creaking chair. "They're gone, Brody," Lonergan says, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "I found their tracks leading off the main wash, heading straight for the Devil's Maze. Looks like they were trying to take a shortcut. Tracks vanished on the slick rock, like they always do. I went in a few miles. No sign of a camp, no water bottles, nothing. You think they're in there?" Wilcox asks. Though he already knows the answer, Lonergan gives a slow, deliberate nod. Nobody comes out of the maze if they don't know what they're doing. They went in with one water bottle between them, according to what was left in the car. They were dead before the sun went down on the first day. He speaks with a flat, final authority, the expert delivering an unassailable diagnosis. This was exactly what Wilcox needed to hear. It was a clean, simple narrative. It required no complicated investigation, no expensive, multi-agency task force, no uncomfortable questions. It was a story of hubris and nature, a story that made sense in his world. "And you're sure there was no trouble?" Wilcox asks. A nod to the one complication in the case, the victim's race. No signs of foul play? Lonergan's expression doesn't change, but his eyes harden slightly. "I poked around, talked to old man Hemmings, the prospector who's got a claim out that way. He saw him, said they were snooping around his area. But he was up on the North Ridge all day. Didn't see anything happen. There was no one else out there. This wasn't people, Brody. This was the desert." Lonergan's testimony is a masterful performance of deception, delivered with the quiet confidence of a man who knows he is speaking to a receptive audience. Every word is a lie, designed to confirm his boss's own prejudices. He had not found tracks leading into the Devil's Maze. He had scuffed a few prints in that direction himself. He had not interviewed the prospector. He had simply used the man's known reputation as a potential red herring. He was feeding the sheriff a story he wanted to believe, a story that would close the case quickly and quietly. Wilcox leans back, satisfied. His expert has spoken. His instincts were right. "All right, Dale. Good work. Go write up your report. I'll handle the press conference and the father." As Lonergan leaves the office, the mask of the competent deputy remains in place. But inwardly, he is calm, confident, and in control. He has just committed a double murder, staged a disappearance, and personally directed the official investigation into a dead end. He has used his reputation as a local expert and his boss's ingrained racism as the primary tools of his cover-up. He knows that in this county, the word of a man like him, against 2 dead, black outsiders is no contest. The desert was the perfect accomplice. It was vast, it was silent, and it never gave up its dead. The press conference was held on the steps of the San Juan County Courthouse, a squat, sandstone building that seemed to bake in the relentless afternoon sun. Sheriff Brody Wilcox stood at a makeshift podium, flanked by the silent, imposing figure of his expert deputy, Dale Lonergan. A handful of local reporters and a single bored-looking cameraman from a Salt Lake City news station made up the audience. At the back of the small crowd, standing alone, was Samuel Sinclair, his face a grim, unreadable mask. Sheriff Wilcox, squinting in the glare, delivered the news with a practiced, somber air. He praised the tireless efforts of his department and the local volunteers. He described the harsh, unforgiving nature of the desert landscape. And then, he laid out the official conclusion, a narrative that had been crafted and solidified in the space of 48 hours. "It is with a heavy heart," Wilcox began, his voice taking on a tone of paternal authority, "that we are officially suspending the active search for Elijah and Nia Sinclair." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "Based on the evidence gathered on the ground by my most experienced deputy, Dale Lonergan, we have concluded that the couple, likely unfamiliar with the extreme dangers of our local terrain, wandered from the designated trail and entered a vast and treacherous canyon system known as the Devil's Maze. The tracks indicate they were unprepared for such a journey. It is the tragic but unavoidable conclusion of this department that they succumbed to the elements, likely from dehydration and exposure, within hours of becoming lost. He then turned and gestured to Lonergan. Deputy Lonergan is the foremost expert on this region. Dale, can you explain to these folks what they were up against? Lonergan stepped forward, his expression one of reluctant, professional gravity. He spoke in a low, even tone, the voice of a man who has seen the desert's cruelty firsthand. That area, it's not a place for amateurs, he said. The rock is slick, the canyons all look the same. A man can get turned around in 10 minutes and never find his way back. There's no water, no shade. In this heat, without at least a gallon of water per person per day, your chances are zero. He shook his head slowly. It's a terrible tragedy, a real shame. The reporters scribbled in their notebooks. The story was simple, tragic, and required no follow-up questions. It was a perfect, self-contained narrative. A reporter asked if there was any suspicion of foul play. Sheriff Wilcox stepped back to the podium, his expression firm. Absolutely not. We have thoroughly investigated that possibility. Deputy Lonergan has spoken with the only other individual known to be in the area, and we are confident that this was a tragic accident, pure and simple. Our hearts go out to the Sinclair family in their time of loss. From the back of the crowd, Samuel Sinclair watched the performance, a cold, silent fury building in his chest. It was a masterclass in institutional racism, delivered with a veneer of folksy concern. They had not conducted an investigation, they had performed an autopsy on a pre-existing conclusion. His son, a brilliant geologist with extensive backcountry experience, and his daughter-in-law, a sharp, observant artist, had been reduced to a racist caricature. Ignorant city folk who had been swallowed by a wilderness they didn't respect. Lonergan's role was the most galling. He was the expert, the unimpeachable source, his testimony the single pillar upon which the entire flawed conclusion rested. Samuel looked at the man, at his calm, confident demeanor, and saw not an expert, but a liar. He didn't know why the man was lying. But his gut, honed by a lifetime of deciphering the coded language of prejudice, told him that Lonergan's story was a fabrication. After the press conference, Samuel approached Sheriff Wilcox. "Sheriff," he said, his voice low but firm, "my son was not an amateur. He was a geologist. He was carrying maps, a GPS, and survival gear. Your conclusion is unacceptable." Wilcox's folksy demeanor vanished, replaced by a flash of irritation. "Now, listen here, Mr. Sinclair," he said, his voice hardening. "I understand you're grieving, but my deputy is the best there is. He says they went into the maze. They went into the maze. There's nothing more to it. I'm sorry for your loss, but this case is closed." He turned and walked away, leaving Samuel standing alone on the courthouse steps, the hot desert wind whipping around him. The case was closed. The official story was written. The local newspaper ran a small article the next day with the headline, "Atlanta Tourists Perish in Desert." It was a story that was not just wrong, but a profound and deliberate injustice. As Samuel made the long, silent drive back to Salt Lake City to catch a flight home, he knew that the search for his son and daughter was not over. The official search may have been a sham, but his own private investigation had just begun. He would not rest until he had dismantled their convenient, racist lie, brick by brick. 8 years. For Samuel Sinclair, the 8 years since his son and daughter-in-law had vanished were a testament to the dual nature of time. In the world outside, time had moved with its usual relentless pace. He had retired from his professorship at the university. His wife, Eleanor, had passed away from a quiet, lingering illness, her grief a gentle, corrosive force that had finally worn her down. Gray had colonized his temples, and the lines on his face had deepened, a roadmap of a sorrow that had become a permanent part of his geography. But in the quiet of his study, time was frozen. The case of Elijah and Nia Sinclair was perpetually, eternally the present. The room was a private incident command post, a monument to an unsolved crime. One wall was dominated by a massive, satellite image map of the Utah desert, a place he had never seen before, 2010 but now knew with a cartographer's intimacy. The map was covered in his own annotations, in pins and strings, a desperate attempt to impose a historian's order on a chaotic, incomplete narrative. File cabinets that had once held lecture notes on the Reconstruction era now held the fruits of his 8-year obsession. There were binders filled with geological surveys of the region, with studies on desert survival, with every newspaper clipping related to the case. He had the complete, if frustratingly thin, official case file, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. He had read it 100 times, his academic's mind dissecting every word, every assumption, every lazy, prejudiced conclusion. His grief was not the soft, melancholic ache of most bereaved parents. It was a cold, hard, analytical anger. He was a historian, a man who believed that the truth, however deeply buried, could be excavated, and he believed that the truth of his son's disappearance had been deliberately and maliciously buried under a thick layer of institutional racism and incompetence. His investigation, his obsession, had always centered on the one piece of evidence he possessed that the sheriff never had: Elijah's last email. The mention of the territorial deputy. That deputy, he knew, was Dale Lonergan, the man whose expert testimony had single-handedly closed the case. Lonergan was the linchpin of the entire flawed narrative. Over the years, Samuel had conducted his own, quiet, long-distance investigation into the man. He had spent thousands of dollars hiring a private investigator in Salt Lake City to build a file on him. The results were both illuminating and frustrating. Lonergan, who had been elected sheriff himself after Brody Wilcox retired, was a man of considerable and somewhat mysterious wealth. He had acquired large tracts of land, a new house, a portfolio of investments that seemed wildly inconsistent with the modest salary of a rural Utah lawman. But there was no direct evidence of any wrongdoing. He was, by all public accounts, a respected, effective sheriff, a pillar of his community. Samuel had even, on 2 separate occasions, flown back to Utah himself. He had tried to speak with the reclusive prospector, Hemmings, whom Lonergan had mentioned in his report, but the old man had chased him off with a shotgun. He had tried to hike the trail where his son's car had been found, but the vast, silent, and intimidating landscape had overwhelmed him, a painful reminder of his own limitations. He was a scholar, not an outdoorsman. He could fight this battle in the archives, but not on the ground. His wife's death 2 years prior had been a turning point. In her final days, she had made him promise that he would not let his obsession consume him, that he would find a way to make peace with the not knowing. He had tried. He had attempted to let it go, to accept the world's verdict, to consign his son and daughter-in-law to the realm of memory. But he could not. The injustice was too great. The lie was too loud. The historian in him knew that history is a living thing and that the past is never truly past. So, he waited. He lived his quiet, scholarly life, but a part of him was always on watch, a sentinel scanning the horizon for a sign. He did not know what form it would take: a deathbed confession, a newly discovered witness. He only knew that a lie of that magnitude could not hold forever. The earth itself, he believed, would eventually cry out. He was a man of faith, not in a deity, but in the slow, inexorable power of the truth. He was waiting for the desert to give up its dead. The Bureau of Land Management's Abandoned Minelands program was one of the least glamorous but most critical jobs in the American West. It was a slow, methodical effort to find and permanently seal the thousands of forgotten mines that riddled the landscape, a legacy of the boom and bust cycles of the 19th and 20th centuries. These mines were death traps, their unstable tunnels and hidden vertical shafts, a constant danger to hikers, hunters, and anyone who strayed from the beaten path. In the late summer of 2018, a BLM crew was working in a remote, sun-scorched section of San Juan County, Utah. The team, led by a grizzled, no-nonsense foreman named Hank, was a small, efficient unit of heavy equipment operators and explosives experts. Their target for the day was an unmapped, collapsed silver mine from the early 1900s. Its entrance little more than a jumble of fallen rock and sun-bleached timbers at the base of a desolate mesa. The standard procedure for a collapsed entrance was to use a small, controlled explosive charge to clear the loose debris before sealing the shaft permanently with polyurethane foam and a steel grate. The team's explosives expert, a young man named Corey, carefully drilled a series of holes into the largest boulders blocking the entrance and set the charges. "Fire in the hole!" he yelled, the traditional warning echoing in the vast, silent desert. The crew, hunkered down behind their truck 100 yards away, felt the solid thud of the detonation more than they heard it. A cloud of red dust billowed from the mouth of the mine. They waited for the dust to settle and then approached cautiously. The blast had worked perfectly, dislodging the key boulders and revealing the dark, square opening of the mine shaft. It was a black, gaping maw in the side of the mesa, exhaling a breath of cool, musty air that smelled of damp earth and deep time. Hank, the foreman, unclipped a powerful, wide-beam flashlight from his belt. Standard procedure required them to do a quick visual inspection of the shaft's integrity before sealing it. He played the beam of light into the darkness. The shaft was a classic hard rock mine, a narrow tunnel about 6 feet high, shored up with thick, ancient timbers. The beam cut through the absolute blackness, glinting off veins of quartz in the rock walls. He swept the light from side to side, and then he froze. "What the hell?" he breathed. Deep in the darkness, about 50 feet back from the entrance, the beam of his flashlight had landed on something that did not belong. It was not a rock. It was not an old piece of mining equipment. It was two pale white shapes, sitting upright. Corey came up beside him, shining his own, more focused beam into the tunnel. The shapes came into sharper focus. They were skeletons. Two of them. They were fully clothed in the tattered, decayed remnants of modern hiking clothes. And they were seated, side by side, on an old wooden ore crate, their backs resting against the rock wall of the mine. Their posture was eerily calm, almost formal, as if they were posing for a photograph. A profound, shocked silence fell over the BLM crew. They were men who were accustomed to the dangers of the desert, but this was something else entirely. This was not an accident. This was a tomb. The scene was too deliberate, too staged, to be the result of two lost hikers seeking shelter. Hank, his face pale under his tan, slowly backed away from the entrance. He grabbed the satellite phone from his truck, his hands shaking slightly. He knew exactly who he had to call. This was no longer a job for the BLM. This was a crime scene. He dialed the number for the Utah Bureau of Criminal Investigation in Salt Lake City. "Yeah, this is Hank Redmond with the BLM out in San Juan County," he said, his voice a low, urgent rumble. "You folks need to get a team down here. We were sealing an old mine. We just found them. We found the missing kids from Atlanta." The call from the BLM foreman in San Juan County landed on the desk of the head of the Utah Bureau of Criminal Investigation's Cold Case Unit. And from there, it was assigned to the one person in the department who was uniquely suited to the task, Detective Kate Riley. At 35, Riley was a rising star in the BCI, a new breed of investigator who combined a relentless, old-school detective's intuition with a deep, abiding faith in the power of forensic science and data analysis. She was sharp, methodical, and possessed a quiet, focused intensity that often unnerved older, more traditional cops. The Sinclair case was, to her, a perfect, self-contained puzzle. She spent 2 full days in her Salt Lake City office before ever heading south, immersing herself in the original, shockingly thin case file from 2010. She read Sheriff Brody Wilcox's report, with its swift, dismissive conclusion of "lost to the desert." She read the single, uncorroborated testimony of Deputy Dale Lonergan. As a data-driven investigator, she was appalled by the lack of rigor. The entire case had been closed based on a single subjective opinion, with no physical evidence to support it. It was a masterclass in confirmation bias, or worse. Her first official act was not to drive to the crime scene, but to make a phone call. She found Samuel Sinclair's number in the file. She knew this call was critical. She was not just informing the next of kin. She was attempting to build a bridge of trust that had been burned by the original investigation 8 years ago. Samuel answered on the second ring, his voice wary and guarded. "Mr. Sinclair," she began, her tone professional but respectful. "My name is Detective Kate Riley with the Utah Bureau of Criminal Investigation. I'm calling about your son, Elijah, and his wife, Nia. Sir, we believe we have found them." There was a long, profound silence on the other end of the line, a silence so heavy that Riley could feel the weight of 8 years of waiting within it. She heard Samuel take a single, shuddering breath. "Are they?" he began, his voice a hoarse whisper, unable to finish the question. "I am so sorry, sir," Riley said softly. "They are deceased. They were discovered by a BLM crew inside an abandoned mine shaft." She then made a crucial decision. She did not offer platitudes or false comfort. She offered the one thing she knew this man had been denied: the truth of the process. "Mr. Sinclair, I have reviewed the original investigation from 2010. I find it to be incomplete. As of this moment, I am treating this as a new investigation, starting from scratch. We have no theories. We have only the evidence at the scene. My only promise to you is that my team and I will follow that evidence wherever it leads. You have my word." She heard another long pause, and then, for the first time, a thawing in the old professor's voice. "Detective Riley," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "That is the first honest thing a law enforcement officer from your state has said to me in 8 years. What do you need from me?" The alliance was formed. Riley knew she now had more than just a grieving father. She had a partner, a living archive of the case's history and its injustices. The next day, she flew to the remote county. The landscape below a stunning, intimidating expanse of red and brown. The crime scene at the mine had been sealed, a temporary, high-tech city of forensic tents and BCI vehicles materializing in the desolate wilderness. Riley's first act was to enter the mine herself. She moved slowly, her flashlight beam cutting through the absolute darkness, until she saw them. The two skeletons, seated together on the crate, their empty eye sockets staring into the eternal night. The scene was profoundly sad, but it was also, to her detective's eye, profoundly wrong. It was too neat, too deliberate. It was not a place of rest. It was a statement. This was not an accident. This was a message, and her job was to decipher it. The interior of the old silver mine was a perfect, if horrifying, time capsule. The dry, stable, and completely dark environment had preserved the scene with an almost impossible clarity. For Detective Kate Riley, it was a crime scene uncorrupted by the elements, a pristine text waiting to be read. The narrative began to reveal itself almost immediately. The first and most glaring piece of evidence was the position of the bodies themselves. The forensic anthropology team, led by a specialist from the state medical examiner's office, began their meticulous on-site analysis. The two skeletons, which would later be positively identified through dental records as Elijah and Nia Sinclair, were not found in a natural state of repose. "This is a staged scene," the lead anthropologist, Dr. Alistair Finch, stated, his voice echoing slightly in the confines of the mine. He pointed his gloved finger at the skeletons. "The post-mortem positioning is completely unnatural. They are seated upright, side by side, in a posture that defies the natural process of decomposition and skeletal collapse. Had they died here, their bodies would have slumped, fallen, and disarticulated over 8 years. This," he said, gesturing to their eerily formal seated arrangement, "is a deliberate pose. Someone placed them like this after death." The observation was the first major pivot in the investigation. It single-handedly destroyed the last lingering possibility that the Sinclairs had sought shelter in the mine and had become trapped. They had not died here. They had been brought here. The mine was not a shelter, it was a tomb. The second piece of critical evidence came from the geological team that Riley had brought in from the State University. Their task was to analyze the entrance of the mine. The original BLM crew had cleared the entrance with explosives, but the geologists were able to reconstruct the nature of the original collapse by analyzing the blast patterns on the remaining rock and the composition of the debris pile. Their report was unequivocal. The mine had not been sealed by a natural rock slide or the slow, patient collapse of old timbers. The entrance was sealed by a deliberate external blast. The lead geologist explained to Riley, pointing to the fracture patterns on the rock face around the mine's opening. The blast was directional, designed to bring the cliff face down directly in front of the entrance. It was a professional job, done by someone who knew how to handle explosives and how to read the rock. This was a calculated act of concealment. The case was now, without any doubt, a double homicide. Someone had killed Elijah and Nia Sinclair, transported their bodies deep into this forgotten mine, posed them in a bizarre, seated tableau, and then used explosives to seal the entrance, entombing them in the darkness. The crime was one of profound, calculated brutality. But it was also a crime of immense arrogance. The killer had been so confident in the remoteness of the location, so certain that this unmapped mine would never be found, that they had taken the time to create this strange, macabre scene. Riley's investigation now had a clear, if daunting, direction. She was looking for a killer with a very specific and unusual skill set. She needed a suspect who not only had a motive to kill the Sinclairs, but who also had an intimate knowledge of the region's abandoned mines, experience with explosives, and the physical strength to transport two bodies into the remote backcountry. As the remains of Elijah and Nia were respectfully removed from the mine, their 8-year vigil in the darkness finally over, Riley stood at the entrance, looking out at the vast, silent desert. The original investigation had blamed this landscape for their deaths, but Riley knew now that the desert was not the killer. It was just another crime scene, another silent witness. The real monster was a human one, a person who had used the desert's silence and a sheriff's prejudice as the perfect accomplices to a perfect crime. With the fact of a double homicide now firmly established, the investigation pivoted to the most critical question: how did the Sinclairs die? The initial examination of the skeletons at the scene had revealed no obvious signs of trauma. There were no bullet holes, no knife marks on the bones, no evidence of the kind of blunt force trauma that would leave a fracture. They had not been shot or beaten. This lack of physical violence only deepened the mystery of the staged, entombed crime scene. The full answer came a week later, from the toxicology lab at the Utah State Medical Examiner's office. The forensic anthropologist, Dr. Finch, had taken samples from the densest parts of the skeletons, the femurs, and the petrous part of the temporal bones, where chemical traces could be preserved for decades. The lab had conducted a comprehensive toxicology screen, looking for any sign of drugs or poisons. The report landed on Detective Riley's desk, and it delivered the second, and far more shocking, forensic bombshell of the case. The cause of death was acute arsenic poisoning. The concentrations are astronomical, Dr. Finch explained to Riley over the phone, his voice a mixture of scientific fascination and professional horror. We're seeing levels in the bone tissue that are hundreds of times higher than any possible environmental exposure. This was not a slow, accidental accumulation. This was a massive, single-dose ingestion event. They were, to put it bluntly, fed a lethal amount of arsenic, enough to kill them within a matter of hours. The discovery of the poison was a cataclysmic shift in the investigation. It transformed the crime from a potential act of passion or a violent confrontation into something far more sinister, a cold, calculated, and intimate act of murder. Poison is a quiet weapon. It requires a degree of trust, a moment where the victim willingly ingests the substance that will kill them. Someone had not just killed Elijah and Nia. They had tricked them. They had handed them their own deaths, likely in a bottle of water or a shared meal. The profile of the killer changed instantly. Riley was no longer just looking for a strong man with a knowledge of explosives. She was looking for a cunning, patient, and ruthless individual, someone with access to arsenic and the psychological fortitude to watch two people die. The investigation now had a new, singular focus: arsenic. Riley and her team began a deep dive into the geology and history of the region. They learned that arsenic is a naturally occurring element in the local geology, often found alongside deposits of silver, gold, and other precious metals. This was a double-edged sword. It meant the poison could have been sourced locally, but it also made it difficult to trace. But the historical research provided a more promising lead. A retired geology professor from the University of Utah informed them that, in the old days, prospectors had used a dangerous and now highly illegal chemical process involving arsenic to separate gold and silver from raw ore. The process, a crude form of chemical leaching, was effective but produced a highly toxic arsenic trioxide sludge as a byproduct. This was the connection Riley had been looking for. The arsenic was not just a poison, it was a tool of a specific illicit trade. Her suspect was likely not just a killer, but an illegal miner, a modern-day prospector using old, dangerous techniques to work a secret claim. The new theory of the crime began to form, a narrative that finally connected all the disparate, bizarre pieces of the puzzle. Elijah Sinclair, the brilliant PhD geology student, had been in the desert studying old mines. With his expert knowledge, he would have been able to read the landscape, to see the signs of a modern, active, and illegal mining operation that a casual observer would miss. He and Nia had not just stumbled upon a person, they had stumbled upon a secret, a rich, unrecorded claim being worked by a man who was using a toxic, illegal poison to extract his wealth. The motive was no longer a mystery. It was pure, cold, financial greed. The Sinclairs, with their scientific knowledge and their inconvenient presence, were a direct threat to the killer's secret livelihood. They had to be eliminated. The poisoning was the perfect, silent weapon, and the elaborate staging of their bodies in the mine, the abandoned car, the false trail, it was all a grand, theatrical misdirection, designed to send the original, prejudiced investigators looking for a simple story of lost tourists, while the real story, a story of poison and greed, was sealed away in the darkness. Armed with the new explosive forensic evidence, Detective Kate Riley knew her next step was to return to the source of the original, flawed investigation. She needed to re-interview the two men who had shaped the Lost in the Desert narrative, the retired Sheriff Brody Wilcox and the man who had since taken his place, Sheriff Dale Lonergan. She was not just seeking information, she was probing for the cracks in a 50-year-old lie. Her first stop was a small, sun-bleached bungalow on the outskirts of town, the home of the now-retired Brody Wilcox. She found him on his porch, a paunchy, florid man in his late 60s, his face a roadmap of burst capillaries. He was defensive from the moment she introduced herself, his old-world authority curdling into a resentful, dismissive posture. "I heard you found them," he said, not making eye contact, his gaze fixed on the distant mesas. "Told that father of theirs what happened 8 years ago. Sad story, but the desert don't play." Riley let his comment hang in the dry air. "We have reason to believe it wasn't the desert, Sheriff," she said, her voice even. "The ME's report confirms the cause of death was arsenic poisoning. They were murdered." Wilcox's head snapped around, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of shock and suspicion. "Poison? That's crazy. Who the hell would do something like that out here?" "That's what I'm trying to find out," Riley said. "I need to go over your original investigation, specifically your deputy's report, Dale Lonergan. He was the only one on the ground, correct?" "Dale's the best there is," Wilcox said, his defensiveness hardening into a kind of tribal loyalty. "He knows that country better than the damn coyotes. If he said he found tracks leading into the maze, he found tracks. His word is good as gold in this county." The interview was a dead end, but a telling one. Wilcox was a man of impenetrable prejudice, his faith in his former deputy absolute, He was a brick wall, but a brick wall that was clearly protecting something. Her next meeting was with Sheriff Dale Lonergan himself. She met him in the same office where Wilcox had once reigned, though Lonergan had renovated it, the cluttered, dusty room now a clean, modern space with a large American flag and a row of neatly framed commendations on the wall. Lonergan, now in his late 50s, was the picture of a modern, professional lawman. He was fit, his uniform was crisp, and his handshake was firm. He greeted Riley with an air of somber, professional cooperation. "Detective Riley, this is a terrible development," he began, his face a mask of grave concern. "I knew those kids were in trouble, but I never suspected anything like this. Murder. It's a dark day for this county." He offered her his full cooperation, access to all the old files, anything she needed. He was smooth, confident, and played the part of the concerned public servant to perfection. Riley, maintaining a neutral, professional demeanor, began to probe. "Sheriff, you were the lead on the original ground search," she said. "Your report was the basis for the conclusion. I need you to walk me through it again." Lonergan leaned back in his chair, a look of thoughtful recollection on his face. "It was a long time ago, Detective. But you don't forget something like that. The tracks were faint, but they were there, heading right for the mouth of the maze. It was a classic case of city folks getting turned around, taking a wrong turn. And the local prospector, Hemmings?" Riley asked. "You interviewed him?" Lonergan nodded slowly, a look of distaste on his face. "Old man Hemmings. Yeah, I talked to him. He's a nasty piece of work. A recluse, paranoid as they come. Always been rumors about him, that he's not all there." He saw the couple, admitted they were snooping around his claim. "To be honest with you, Detective," he said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "if you're looking for someone out here with a short fuse and a grudge against outsiders, he'd be the one. I always had my suspicions about him, but I never had any proof." It was a masterful performance. He was subtly, expertly, steering her investigation. He was handing her a perfect, plausible suspect on a silver platter, a dead, eccentric recluse who couldn't defend himself, a man who fit the profile of a desert killer. He was using his reputation as the local expert to create a red herring, a false trail that would lead her away from the truth, just as he had done 8 years earlier. Riley listened, her expression unreadable, her mind a cold, analytical machine. Lonergan was good. He was very, very good. But she could see the faint, almost imperceptible tells. The way his eyes never quite met hers, the slight, rehearsed quality of his story. She was not talking to a helpful colleague, she was talking to a liar. Sheriff Dale Lonergan's helpful suggestion was a perfectly crafted piece of misdirection, a gift to a state investigator who didn't know the local landscape or its players. The deceased prospector, Jedediah Hemmings, was the ideal suspect. He was a ghost, a man with a reputation for being a paranoid, antisocial recluse, a convenient repository for any unsolved crime in the county. Detective Kate Riley knew she was being manipulated, but she also knew that to catch a liar like Lonergan, she had to first walk down the false path he had laid out for her. The investigation into Jedediah Hemmings became a meticulous, if theatrical, exercise. Riley and her team dedicated weeks to building a circumstantial case against the dead man. It was a necessary step, a way to show Lonergan that she was taking his lead seriously, to lull him into a false sense of security. They began by excavating the history of the man himself. Hemmings had died of natural causes 4 years prior, a fact that Lonergan had conveniently failed to mention. He had lived a life on the absolute margins of society, a man who had intentionally erased himself from the modern world. He had no family, no credit history, no official records beyond a deed to his small, isolated mining claim. Riley's team obtained a warrant to search his dilapidated, abandoned cabin. The place was a time capsule of paranoia. The windows were boarded up, and the shelves were lined with dusty canned goods and old prospecting manuals. They found what they expected to find: several unregistered firearms, a collection of antique mining tools, and, most significantly, a small, locked shed out back. Inside the shed, they found a crude, homemade laboratory. There were beakers, scales, and several large, unlabeled canisters containing various chemical compounds. This was the first piece that seemed to fit Lonergan's narrative. The BCI's mobile crime lab was brought in to analyze the chemicals. They found exactly what they were looking for. Several pounds of a commercial-grade arsenic trioxide, a compound that could be used for both illegal ore processing and, of course, poisoning. The circumstantial case against Hemmings was now incredibly strong. He had the means, arsenic. He had the opportunity. He was known to be in the area and had admitted to seeing the Sinclairs. And he had a potential motive, a paranoid territorial prospector protecting his claim from two inquisitive outsiders. Riley made a point of keeping Sheriff Lonergan informed of every development. She would call him, her tone professional and collaborative, to update him on the findings at the Hemmings cabin. "You were right, Sheriff," she said, her voice a carefully calibrated instrument of deception. "It looks like Hemmings is our man. The arsenic on his property is a near-perfect match for the toxicology report. The DA is confident they can get a posthumous indictment and officially close the case." On the other end of the line, she could almost hear the quiet sigh of relief from Lonergan, the subtle relaxing of a man who believed his 8-year-old secret was about to be buried forever under the headstone of a dead man. He offered his congratulations, his voice full of feigned admiration for her sharp, big-city detective work. "I knew you'd get him, Detective," he said. "Sometimes you just need a little local knowledge to point you in the right direction." The red herring had been taken, hook, line, and sinker. The local media ran stories about the break in the Sinclair case, naming the deceased prospector as the prime suspect. The narrative seemed to be reaching its neat, tidy conclusion. But Riley knew it was all a fiction. The case against Hemmings was too perfect, too convenient. It was the story Lonergan wanted her to find. While the world was focused on the ghost of Jedediah Hemmings, Detective Kate Riley was preparing for the final, real phase of her investigation. She was done following the false trail. It was time to start hunting the man who had laid it. While the investigation into the dead prospector provided a convenient public narrative, Detective Kate Riley was orchestrating a final, secret forensic analysis, the one she believed would provide the irrefutable, scientific link to the real killer. Her focus was not on the poison, but on the tomb itself. The geological report had confirmed that the mine had been sealed by a deliberate, external blast. Riley's final question was simple. What kind of explosives were used? She sent the rock and soil samples, collected by the geologists from the blast site at the mine entrance, to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, National Laboratory in Maryland. This was the most advanced explosives analysis lab in the country, a place that could identify the unique chemical signature of a bomb from a few microscopic grains of residue. The request was a long shot. After 8 years of exposure to the elements, any trace evidence would be faint, degraded. But the dry, stable environment of the desert was on her side. For 2 weeks, she waited, the fate of her entire case resting on the quiet, meticulous work of a lab 1,000 miles away. The report that came back was the third and final forensic bombshell of the investigation. The ATF lab had found what they were looking for. The residue contained clear, unmistakable traces of nitroglycerin and ammonium nitrate, the primary components of dynamite. But the report went further. The analysis of the binding agents and wrapper material was so precise that they were able to identify the specific manufacturer and even the production batch. The explosive used to seal the mine was a commercial-grade dynamite known as ditching dynamite, a type specifically formulated for use in wet conditions, like blasting beaver dams or clearing irrigation channels. But the most critical piece of information was the analysis of the blasting cap residue. The cap had contained a specific, proprietary blend of chemical detonators used by only one manufacturer, and it was a type that was sold almost exclusively to law enforcement and government agencies for controlled demolitions. This was the pivot that turned the entire case on its head. A reclusive, off-the-grid prospector like Jedediah Hemmings might have been able to get his hands on commercial dynamite, but he would have had no access to the kind of specialized, government-issue blasting caps that were used to seal the mine. The explosive signature did not point to a lone wolf prospector. It pointed directly to a government agency. Riley felt a surge of cold, clear certainty. She now had the scientific proof that the killer had access to police or military-grade explosives. The red herring of Jedediah Hemmings was not just a lie, it was a scientific impossibility. Her next step was a move of immense political risk. She was about to investigate a sitting county sheriff. She drove to the San Juan County Courthouse, not to the sheriff's office, but to the records archive in the basement. She was looking for the departmental inventory logs for the sheriff's department's explosive locker for the year 2010. The logbook was a dusty, leather-bound ledger, its entries written in neat, bureaucratic script. She turned the brittle, yellowed pages, her heart pounding. She was looking for any entry related to dynamite or blasting caps. She found it. An entry dated June 28, 2010, 2 days before the Sinclairs were last seen. The entry was for 1 case of ditching dynamite and 1 box of high-security blasting caps. The chemical signature was a perfect match for the ATF report. The stated purpose for signing out the explosives, written in a neat, confident hand, was beaver dam removal on the San Juan River, an operation supposedly taking place in a different county, miles away from the Sinclairs' disappearance. Riley knew this was the lie, the bureaucratic cover for a double murder. She ran her gloved finger down to the bottom of the entry, to the signature of the officer who had signed out the materials. The name was clear and unmistakable: Deputy Dale Lonergan. Riley closed the logbook. The sound echoed in the silent, dusty archive room. She had him. She had the murder weapon, the motive, and now, the physical documentary evidence that linked Sheriff Dale Lonergan directly to the sealing of his victim's tomb. The expert's lie had finally been undone by his own signature. The entry in the explosives inventory log was the final, unassailable piece of the puzzle. It was a truth written in ink, preserved for 8 years in the dusty silence of a courthouse basement. For Detective Kate Riley, it was a moment of profound, chilling clarity. The entire, complex and tragic story of Elijah and Nia Sinclair was now laid bare, not in the shifting sands of testimony or the ambiguity of a motive, but in the cold, hard facts of a government ledger. She sat in her rental car outside the courthouse, the photocopy of the logbook entry on the seat beside her. Dale Lonergan's signature seemed to mock her from the page, a testament to the man's immense arrogance. He had used his own department's resources to commit a murder and conceal the bodies, so confident in his own authority, so certain of his boss's prejudice and the world's indifference, that he had documented his crime in an official logbook, hiding it behind the most mundane of lies: beaver dam removal. Riley could now reconstruct the final, terrible hours of the Sinclairs' lives with a new, horrifying certainty. They had, as she had long suspected, stumbled upon Lonergan's secret, illegal mining operation. Elijah, with his geologist's eye, would have seen the signs that a casual hiker would miss: the freshly disturbed earth, the traces of specific minerals, the subtle signs of a modern operation. They had likely approached Lonergan not with suspicion, but with a scientist's curiosity. Lonergan, the respected deputy, would have played his part. He would have been friendly, knowledgeable, the helpful local lawman. He was the territorial deputy Elijah had written about. A man protecting his secret with a thin veneer of authority. He had likely offered them a tour, a chance to see an old prospector's camp. He had gained their trust, and at some point, he had offered them a drink from his canteen, a canteen laced with a lethal, undetectable dose of arsenic. The rest was a matter of cold, logistical cruelty. He had waited for the poison to do its work. He had then driven their rental car to the remote trailhead, a simple act of misdirection that would send the search in the wrong direction. He had transported their bodies to the abandoned mine he had already chosen as their tomb. He had staged their bodies, a final, macabre act of a man in total control. And then, Using the explosives he had signed out for a phantom public works project, he had sealed the entrance, burying his crime under 100 tons of rock and a mountain of lies. His role in the subsequent search was the most chilling part of all. He had directed the entire operation, performing the role of the expert, the one man who could read the desert. He had created the false trail, the phantom tracks leading into the devil's maze, knowing it would lead nowhere. He had used his reputation and Sheriff Wilcox's racism as his primary accomplices. He had not just committed a murder. He had orchestrated the official cover-up from the inside, ensuring that the truth would remain as buried as his victims. Riley now understood the depth of Lonergan's sociopathy. He was not just a killer. He was a performer. His entire public persona, the competent, respected lawman, the pillar of his community, was a carefully constructed fiction, a shield to hide the greedy, ruthless criminal beneath. She picked up her phone and made the call to Samuel Sinclair in Atlanta. She walked him through the final, terrible pieces of the puzzle. She told him about the explosives, about the logbook, about the signature. She told him that the man who had pretended to search for his son was, in fact, the man who had murdered him. On the other end of the line, there was a long, heavy silence. The sound of an old man absorbing a truth that was both a vindication and a violation. "So the whole time," Samuel finally said, his voice a low, ragged whisper, "the whole time I was there, begging them to find my boy. He was lying to my face." "Yes, sir," Riley said softly. "He was." "Get him," Samuel said, his voice no longer a whisper, but a hard, cold command, the voice of a historian who has finally found the last damning document. "Get that monster." "That's the plan, Mr. Sinclair," Riley replied. "That's the plan." She ended the call and started the car. The time for investigation, for theories, for sifting through the past was over. It was time to make an arrest. The arrest of Sheriff Dale Lonergan was a quiet, surgical operation, executed with the cold precision of a state agency that had just discovered one of its own was a monster. There were no sirens, no dramatic showdown. Detective Kate Riley, accompanied by 2 senior BCI agents, walked into the San Juan County Sheriff's Office in the middle of a quiet Tuesday morning. Lonergan was at his desk, on the phone, a picture of a busy, competent public servant. He saw them enter, and a flicker of something, not surprise, but a deep, cold recognition, passed through his eyes. He ended his call and stood up, his face a mask of professional courtesy. "Detective Riley," he said, his voice smooth. "What can I do for you? Any news on the Hemmings case?" Riley didn't answer his question. She simply placed a single, folded photocopy on his polished desk. It was the entry from the explosives inventory log from June 28, 2010. His signature was at the bottom, clear and damning. Lonergan stared at the paper. He did not speak. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a sallow, gray pallor. The confident, authoritative mask he had worn for his entire adult life dissolved in an instant, revealing the cornered, common criminal beneath. He had been undone not by a witness, not by a confession, but by a single line in a dusty, forgotten book. He had been beaten by the one thing he could not manipulate: the recorded, unalterable past. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply held out his hands, and one of the agents quietly, efficiently, placed him in handcuffs. The man who had been the ultimate authority in this county was now a prisoner, his 8-year reign of lies and deception over. Faced with the irrefutable, cascading evidence, the staged scene, the arsenic, the explosives log, Lonergan confessed. He told the whole, sordid story in a flat, emotionless monotone. He admitted to the illegal mining operation, to the chance encounter with the Sinclairs. He described how Elijah's geological expertise had terrified him, how the young man had looked at the rocks and had seen his entire secret enterprise. He admitted to the poisoning, to staging the bodies, to the cold, calculated deception of the search. He showed no remorse. only the bitter, resentful anger of a man whose perfect crime had been undone by a series of scientific and historical accidents. The final scene of the story belongs to Samuel Sinclair. A month later, he stood at the entrance to the now permanently sealed mine. A simple, bronze plaque marking it as a gravesite. Detective Kate Riley stood beside him. The desert was quiet, the vast, silent landscape no longer feeling like a monster to him, but like a witness, a place that had held the truth until the world was ready to listen. Riley handed him a small, heavy object. It was his son's geology hammer, recovered from the mine. Samuel took it, its familiar weight a tangible link to the brilliant, passionate young man he had lost. "Thank you, Detective," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that was deeper and more complex than grief. "You gave him back his name. You gave them both back their dignity." Riley nodded, her own eyes scanning the vast redrock horizon. "Your son and his wife were scientists, Mr. Sinclair," she said. "They believed in evidence. In the end, that's what found them. The evidence they left behind, and the evidence he did." Samuel looked at the sealed mine, and then out at the immense, beautiful, and terrible landscape. The pain of his loss was a permanent part of him, a geological feature of his own soul, but it was now joined by a sense of profound, quiet closure. The injustice had been answered. The lie had been silenced. The historian had seen history corrected. The desert had finally, after 8 long years, finished telling its story.